So we're going to continue on with Moses. This is his final swan song, pardon the pun. Last chapter was the actual song. But here we're kind of, this, is kind of his final farewell. And unlike last week, that was full of, it was kind of the worst halftime speech ever last week, where it was doom and gloom. Here it's going to be much more positive. So you're going to see him pronounce blessings. So it's kind of the final encouragement right before he's taken home, if you will. And in 34, we'll get to that part. But we're probably not going to get there today, but next week. And here, and one of the commentaries kind of summarized it pretty good. The blessings of Moses pronounced on the tribes differ in content from those given of Jacob. And we're going to kind of see more hope than what Jacob gave in Genesis 49. The oracles of 49 were sometimes judgmental. By contrast, these oracles are consistently redeeming and promissory. They promise continued existence, priestly prerogatives, safety, choice gifts, affluence, reward of the land, possession, prosperity, and strength. And we kind of read that a couple of weeks ago, a verse in Numbers that said that essentially Jacob and Israel got all that God had promised, and they had peace on all sides. So they temporarily attained all the blessings that God promised, and they just, kind of like us, were not able to hold on to it because they prosperity, sometimes breeds complacency and that type of thing. So anything else in the beginning here, Chris?
No, just very much in the style of Isaac blessing who he thinks is Esau, and right. Jacob blessing his sons. Very, when a great person dies, they know they're going to die, and they have the opportunity to, set their affairs in order and give blessings, and that's what we're seeing
here. Yeah, so let's go ahead and read. Somebody want to read the first 3 verses there?
Now this is the blessing with which Moses, the man of God, blessed the children of Israel before his death. And he said, the Lord came from Sinai and dawned on them from Seir. He shone forth from Mount Paran, and he came with 10,000s of saints. From his right hand came a fiery law for them. Yes, he loves the people. All his saints are in your hand. They sit down at your feet, and everyone receives your words.
So,
it's interesting. My translation says there was a right hand, there was a flashing lightning for them.
Huh.
Yeah.
That's cool. Here you see the man of God, which is used kind of throughout the Old Testament. That term kind of denotes the prophet. And obviously Moses, made it to the Mount of Transfiguration, so we know his status as a prophet. You also see here that he kind of, and this is kind of a theme you'll see here, is he's contrasting God's high authority and his place in heaven, and that's contrasted with the gods of the land of the heathens that they're going into. So he keeps elevating the authority and the position of God. And then what I thought was interesting here is the receives your words. So receiving is different, right? It's like it's an active thing that you receive the word. You don't just hear it. I think of James 1:22, right? We need to be doers of the word. And so that was my application question is how do we view God's authority? Do we view it like Moses did? And how are we doing on receiving the word, actively receiving the word, putting it into action? Okay.
So all of this is, Moses is now definitely third person, right? Moses said this, and there's debate on these last two chapters how soon they were written. They were clearly not written by Moses. So was it by Joshua? You know, that we would, the more conservative scholars would say it was written immediately, and then, you know, others would say, well, it was written hundreds and hundreds of years after when the whole book was compiled. So
When they found the Sea Scrolls, did they find Deuteronomy in their scrolls?
yeah, they found some fragments. Yep.
Fragments.
Mhm.
Did they find the end of Deuteronomy?
That's a good question. I don't know. I know they found parts of 32.
Okay.
Yeah, we saw that at the Bible Museum.
I know it was all of Isaiah that they had.
Yeah.
I wish I would have said they had those in Fort Worth a few years ago.
Yeah.
They brought like did a tour.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to go see it. I didn't.
Okay, let's read verses 4 and 5.
I got it. Moses commanded a law for us, a heritage of the congregation of Jacob, and he was king in Jerusalem. When the leaders of the people were gathered, all the tribes of Israel together.
So, a couple of things here. You see the Jerusalem, however you say that.
Yeshurun.
Yeshurun, again, which essentially means holy ones. So, you know, called out, holy. So he's kind of speaking into them despite they're not so holy. But much like us, we're called out, we're holy. So there's the application there. And then the other thing is the heritage, right? The law and the heritage. So, you know, they had this distinct advantage compared to all the other nations because Chris has kind of talked about this, because God gave them the law. They didn't have to guess what the gods were thinking or sacrifice their kids for favor. They knew what the law was, and it was just up to them to follow it, right? And so I think that's the real takeaway here. And then we talked about this before, but Chris had just mentioned it about speaking blessings over the next generation. So why do you think that practice stopped? Do you think that's something we should do?
I think the Jewish people as a whole have kept that. Those that are conservative or Orthodox.
Mm-hmm.
I can't say that Reformed has done that. So as a culture, they have kept that. I think with the Christianization through Constantinople, him bringing in pagan practices and labeling it Christian. Pagans didn't bless their children. Actually, they cursed them, and they wanted to keep those curses going. You keep this up, and you'll have power. You keep this up, and this will happen, or that, whatever. But it's in a negative way. And people will follow whatever's the strongest opinion at the time, because sticking out like a sore thumb brings attention you don't want.
Yeah.
I'm reading a book about hidden curses, and it's the curses that pass from generation to generation because people just are not aware of how powerful words are.
Life and death on the
Life
tongue.
and death with their tongue. And because they haven't seen blessings from generation to generation, they just go with what they've known.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer in the life and death. You know, it's to try to speak and create, you know, positive things, hopeful things, not negative things. Most definitely.
About 45 years ago, a book came out called The Blessing, and it was taking Hebrew blessing on children, why that's so important, not just on children, but blessing other people. And instead of being a mouthful of criticism and complaint, to switch it and kindness, number one. But saying things that are truthful into people's lives because nobody else is.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Interestingly enough, we got to this verse this morning in the men's study, and one of the guys in the study is a good friend of mine, Brightson, and he's from Ghana in Africa. And he said in their culture, they still do this, right? So he took his daughter, young daughter, age, I don't know, 9 or something, to Ghana, and they spoke blessings over her, you know, and they still do that. So I think it's more of a modern Western culture thing, you know, and a lot of the guys were speculating, you know, we've, unlike some of the Eastern cultures, we don't honor our elders, you know, and that's kind of tied into this, right?
Absolutely.
Like if you don't honor your elders, then you're not going to be seeking their blessings, right? So I think we've lost that honor of the elders that we need to recapture as a society and have that wisdom that's passed down.
During COVID, when we were in Salt Lake City with Jerry's heart issue, the news of the area for the Native Americans who were getting COVID is they were saying, you know, it's not just our old ones are dying, whole encyclopedias die with each older one. And I had never looked at it that way before. It's true, they have all of their knowledge that they've gained all their life, and they're to pass it to the next generation. And if it's snuffed out because of a pandemic or an illness or whatever, it's gone.
Right. Okay, verse 6.
Yeah, well, I was thinking that there's a verse
Go ahead.
in was it 1 Timothy 5? I think it might be verse 1 even. Don't rebuke an elder, and the word is not the church office elders, any elder. You know, even if they're doing something wrong, you don't get in their face about it. It's like
Right.
you do it humbly, and you know, so it's that respect.
Privately.
Yeah.
Okay, so verse 6, I guess, let Reuben live and not die, nor let his men be few. So this is interesting. Not a lot of words to Reuben, but compared to what Jacob said about Reuben,
Yes,
definitely
we've improved. Yes,
right. We've improved, right? So you know, in 49:4, Jacob said he is unstable as water, you know, and if you know the whole incident, Jacob slept with, or Reuben slept with Jacob's concubine, right? So definitely some incidents there, but what I see here is Moses gives them hope. So it's kind of like what Mary Beth was saying. It's kind of like they're living under this curse, like they know what Jacob already foretold of their whole tribe, and you weren't the one that did that to Jacob, yet you're in a Reubenite and you're under that same curse, and here he's giving you hope, you know. We shouldn't be defined by our worst moments in life, right? So we all need that hope. So that's what I got out of it.
In addition, when they did the numbering of the Israelites of the new generation, Reuben had 43,730 men aged 20 and older that were fit for war, whereas Judah had 76,500, like comparison. So, you know, you may be few now, but you're going to increase.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. So let's go on to 7.
And you know, where he's standing is in the tribe of Reuben. I don't know if that's significant or not, but that's where he starts. So.
That's interesting. So go ahead, 7.
And this he said of Judah, hear, Lord, the voice of Judah, and bring him to his people. Let his hands be sufficient for him, and may you be a help against his enemies.
So, Chris kind of covered this in the background video if you watched it. If you didn't, I highly recommend you do. But, Judah, of course, had the scepter that should never leave him in the original promise from Jacob. And Judah, of course, is the line of the Messiah. And yet here Moses is very parse in his words towards Judah. But he did say, help him against his enemies. And when we go to Numbers 2, we see that Judah was the first of the tribes to march in. So, he is acknowledging that. And the commentaries kind of said that one of the commentaries, kind of led on Jacob had already given them all those blessings, so there wasn't a whole lot more for Moses to bless them with, other than to give them strength to obtain the blessings that they already have. Right.
It's interesting just how short Judah is, considering they're ultimately the number one tribe.
Exactly. Let's go on 8 through 11.
Okay. And Levi, he said, let your Thummim and your Urim, something like that, be with your Holy One, whom you tested at Massah, and with whom you contended at the waters of Meribah, who says of his father and mother, I have not seen them, nor did he acknowledge his brothers, or know his own children, for they have observed your word and kept your covenant. They shall teach Jacob your judgments, and Israel your law. They shall put incense before you, and a whole burnt sacrifice on your altar. Bless his substance, Lord, and accept the work of his hands. Strike the loins of those who rise against him, and of those who hate him, that they may not rise again.
You want to take this one? Or?
So it's one of the longest ones, and ultimately Moses was from the tribe of Levi, so it's probably I guess just the responsibility that comes with their priestly positions and teaching positions. He's emphasizing there the Thummim and the Urim it's very weird actually. There were these stones that the high priest kept in his chest garment, and they would use to divine the will of the Lord. And that sounds completely pagan and foreign, but there you go. God says you'll have these two stones, and I will communicate what you need to do through these stones. So basically, belonging to a godly man, because obviously that power in the hands of the wrong person could be used for bad things. So.
Yeah, kind of reminds me of Joseph Smith and the Peep Stones.
Yeah,
started the Mormon Church.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I got into the testing thing on the video, but it says whom you tested at Massah. So God, you tested the Levites when it was actually the people that were rebelling and complaining against God. It was a test in the sense that they were the leadership and they had to intervene, and how are they gonna handle it? So it's kind of a look on the other side of the test, and you see how it's a test for you meant it as a test, rebelling against God, but God used it as a test to test your mettle.
One of the other commentaries picked up that Genesis 49, 5 through 7 kind of cursed the Levites, and here the curse is kind of wiped away through their actions, through their word, and them keeping their covenant, which I thought was an interesting, once again, Moses bringing hope, and lifting the curse, which seems to be a theme here, right? And then Moses passed over Simeon, possibly because, as Jacob foretold, he was going to be scattered among his brethren. In fact, his inheritance was within the territory of Judah. So the blessing of Judah would have been the blessing on Simeon, is what the study Bible notes said. I thought just from an application standpoint, bringing this forward, we are called a chosen people, a royal priesthood,
Right.
a holy nation, and a special possession. 1 Peter 2:9. So the next time someone tries to remind you of your failures, whether it's the enemy or someone else, this is a good verse to remember that you're chosen, you're a holy priesthood. That's kind of one of my pet peeves, is that we seem to get into this cycle, and I get it on Sunday morning that we all have to acknowledge that we're sinful and all that, but that's kind of talking about the old man, not the new man. And sometimes I think it's good for us to remind us of our new identity in Christ as a royal priesthood, and not let the enemy define us as the old man. So, go ahead.
Now I'm stuck on this Thummim and Urim deal. I did not know that. I didn't know that was a thing. And I wonder sometimes, so like in my life, I have forever been brought to these choices I gotta make. This job or that job, this city or that city, go to school or keep working, right? And trying to figure out, wait for God to speak out of heaven, and tell me to stand, jump up and down, rub my belly, and turn left and right, I've ended up having to just be like, and it's always been so hard, except for the last 4 years, I've finally understood. It's like, there's some of these things, yeah, we want to hear from God, because we don't want to get ahead of God. But there's a lot of things in life where it's just like, I just got to understand God's saying, hey, if you go here or there, I'm going to be with you, right? Like, not everything is so set in stone. I mean, we know certain things are, right? Kill or not kill. Like, that's set in stone, right? Murder or not murder. But this job or that job, if I don't hear from heaven real quick, then I've got to think God's saying, it's kind of like however they use those stones, you know what I mean? Roll the dice. I'm going to go with you left, I'm going to go with you right, whichever way you go, because you're my son, I love you, and we're going to work that out. And so that's how it's been in my life a lot of times, which, since I couldn't hear God say, go left or right, I would be stagnant and do nothing. And stayed stagnant and did nothing for a long time,
Yeah.
When now I've come to the conclusion that God's always been, most of the time, has been saying, hey man, come on, let's go. Which way you go, I'm gonna go. And so I wonder if that's kind of the thought in those stones, or how they use those stones sometimes.
Yeah, Exodus 28:30, you shall put in the breastplate of the judgment of Aaron's garments the Urim and the Thummim, and they shall be over Aaron's heart when he goes in before the Lord. And Aaron shall carry the judgment of the sons of Israel over his heart before the Lord continually. And then there's a verse in Numbers 27, he shall stand before Eleazar the priest, who shall inquire for him. By the judgment of the Urim before the Lord, at his command they shall go out, and his command they shall come in, both he and all the sons of Israel with them and all the congregation. So, we don't know exactly how it worked.
Yeah, and isn't there's something happened in the New Testament at some point, if I remember, there was a shipwreck or something, and they cast lots to see what they was going to...
That was Jonah.
Oh, was that Jonah? That was
Jonah.
Jonah.
Old Testament. Yeah.
Okay.
But the thing that always helps me on this, and this is just how my mind works, but I believe it was in Acts with Paul. He was going to go, I think he was going to Macedonia, right? He was going to Macedonia, and his plan was to preach and bring the word to Macedonia. And then he's headed there, he's walking. I mean, no telling how many days he traveled, right? And then all of a sudden he says the Holy Spirit blocked him. So then he turns around, right? And then he goes this way, I forget which city it was, and he says the Holy Spirit blocked him. So he went that way, he went this way, then he goes this way, and the Holy Spirit blocks him. So he went 3 different directions. So now he can only go back. So then he goes back, and then in Cody's version, he's at the ship port eating fish and chips with, you know, the other disciples going, what do we do now? And he ends up on a boat. Now, if Paul didn't know the will of God and
Right.
which way to go,
Right.
then how am I going to do it, right? But Paul knew that he was supposed to go,
Yeah.
right? And God was going to be with him, and God would close the door if he wasn't supposed to go there, or he'd open the door if he was supposed to go. So that's what I do. I pray for open and closed doors.
Yeah.
And if the door opens, then unless there's a red flag
Yeah.
or something like that, I assume that's where God wants me to go. I mean, I'm dealing with a job opportunity right now. I don't know if the door's been opened or not, but I've already interviewed for the position. And the one I wanted closed. I didn't get it. So now there's this other position that I'm considering, but I don't know if the door's open or not. So I'm going to be happy. If the answer is no, then God didn't want me to have it.
Yeah. So
if it's yes, then I'm going to get over my fear, even though it's a different position.
Yeah, and so looking at it like that, like he went this way, blocked this way, blocked this way. The point is, he didn't stop going.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We keep going.
And you're sensitive to the Lord saying, no, stop.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
That's a big thing.
When we go off and we charge off, and you know, next thing we know, we turn around and God's way behind us.
Yeah.
Since we've gotten so far out in front.
Well, family of origin pushed every single time that we moved from one duty station to the next. You know, within a week, why aren't you working? And it didn't matter what I said in regards to why I wasn't working. It was, you have to work, you have to work, you have to work. Now flip, Jerry dies, I was working here at the church, financial problem happened, and I thought going back to work was the answer. I really did. And I was filling out applications, but God thwarted me in ways he's never thwarted me before. And it was clear to me that he did not want me to go back to work at that time. And I'm thinking he wants me to start work in January, but
you'll find out.
I'm not sure,
Yeah.
but I'm walking every day, one step at a time, living in the moment, praying for my next job. Where is it you want me to work? Who is it you want me to bless or be blessed by? But I'm here right now, Lord. Use me here.
Yeah. Well, I know my mom is 76 and she's about to start another job. So she can't stay retired, you know, so. Let's go on to verse 12, I think is where we're at, right?
Of Benjamin, he said, may the beloved of the Lord live in security beside him, who shields him all day long and lives between his shoulders.
You talked about this on the video.
Yeah, so the between his shoulders, it just reminded me of these, you know, where I forget the verse right now, but it's in John where the beloved disciple is up against Jesus's breast, and you know, the between the shoulders, literally, just the nestled in the bosom. Just that peace and safety that we have when we're in, you know, in his protection.
Benjamin, were they up in the hill country too?
They were actually, Jerusalem is in the territory of Benjamin, so
okay.
It's they're just right north of Judah.
Okay.
And they held this crossroad that was, you know, gold, anyone who held it, and so they were always having to defend it, and it was always, yeah.
Okay. And they were the ones that were really skilled.
They got good at defending it. Yeah.
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 Yeah. Okay. 13 through 17.
Got it. Okay, so, and of Joseph he said, blessed of the Lord is his land, with the precious things of heaven, with the dew and the deep lying beneath, with the precious fruits of the sun, with the precious produce of the mouth, months with the best things of the ancient mountains, with the precious things of the everlasting hills, with the precious things of the earth in its fullness, and the favor of him who dwelt in the bush. Let the blessing come on the head of Joseph, and on the crown of his head of him who was separate from his brothers. His glory is like a firstborn bull, and his horns like the horns of a wild ox. Together with them he shall push the peoples to the ends of the earth. They are the 10,000s of Ephraim, and they are the thousands of Manasseh.
So, obviously Joseph got a double portion of a blessing here, and then that gets passed down to his kids, Ephraim and Manasseh. Ephraim is the 10,000s compared to Manasseh, the thousands. So you see here, this is a reflection because Ephraim was the youngest, and we go all the way back to
the blessing.
Yeah, Jacob blessing them, and Joseph bringing his two boys in and bringing the oldest towards his right hand because his vision is failing. And then Jacob does the swaps, and crosses the arms so he can bless the younger, right? And then Joseph even tries to correct him, and he says, "No, I know what I'm doing," So you see that. Obviously this is the northern tribe that kind of split away. And so some of the commentaries that I was talking about is that all the blessings of the tribe will come to fulfillment in the kingdom age. So yes, they were given that temporary blessing, but the full realization won't be until they accept their Messiah. Eventually Israel will accept the Messiah, and that'll be their fulfillment. But once again, our kingdom age is already here. We have the ability to have that now.
But just the way the weather patterns work, so it's the further north you are and the further west you are, the more rain you're going to get. And so Ephraim is in that, if you see the kind of two big brown areas on the map, Ephraim's in the upper one and Judah's the lower one. And so just that little bit of difference, Ephraim really, it wasn't like lush water all the time, but they had water, much more so than Judah did. So it was easier to be prosperous. And of course, water was everything, if you're in an agriculture society. So they always had, they were, one commentator would compare the kings of Israel to Bill Clinton saying, yeah, but look at the economy. Morally we're falling apart, but that doesn't matter because look at the economy.
Right.
Look at how good we're doing, and the kings of Judah are going, but you're wicked. So it was that much easier to be prosperous up there.
Did all the tribes have separate kings?
Yeah.
No. That came. David was king over all the tribes for a few years. Solomon was for a few years, and then basically they split into north and south.
Okay, 18 and 19.
And of Zebulun, he said, "Rejoice, Zebulun, in your going out, and Issachar in your tents. They shall call the peoples to the mountain. They shall offer sacrifices of righteousness, for they shall partake of the abundance of the seas and of treasures hidden in the sand."
So here, I think the real takeaway on the commentaries I read was the blessings from the seas and the sands, and sharing the blessings, right? So they were called to share the blessings. So if you think about this from a modern standpoint, the gifts of the church, we all have gifts and we're supposed to share corporately. So them being in the sea, they had different things that they were supposed to trade and share with the other tribes. And I think this is where we need to learn, to be able to share out of our abundance, because we all have abundance. It's just a matter of what we have abundance and what we share. And for some of us that may be material, for others it may be labor, service, and maybe other things. But we all have that abundance that we need to share. Thoughts? Anything?
Well, it's always been here in America when there's a drought, wherever I'm living at. So whether it's Virginia or Texas or Florida or Mississippi or Pennsylvania, I've always thought that the states that have the abundance of water could ship it to the state that is without.
Right.
But of course, our country operates on capitalism, so they wouldn't unless there was a great fee. And we're already burdened enough with the taxes that we have or the whatever. But if water is life, I'd be willing to pay a little bit more to have that water.
Yeah, I don't know how much of this is true, but there's lots of stories like Saddam Hussein, supposedly before he lost power, he had tried to switch the currency to a gold back, and he had also made gardens out of the desert.
Yes.
And there are supposedly deep wells, and we have the technology now.
Yes.
But there's like an abundant source.
Yes.
God gave everything that we need,
Mm-hmm.
and there's more water than we could ever use. We just haven't taken the effort to drill down to it. And when someone did, and they really started to change things for their people, the deep state came in and wiped him out. And I'm not saying he's a good guy. There's definitely some evil there, but he did help his people.
In one area, yeah. And,
right.
But that is true of human nature throughout the world.
Yes.
And it comes back to vanity, pride, and lust. Those three. And
eventually, though, of his kingdom there'll be no end.
Yes.
So when the righteous reign, the people rejoice. So if we can get more righteous people in there,
yes.
then we can do that, right?
Yes.
And we can bring his kingdom here.
Yes.
Now, the ultimate fulfillment may be when Jesus comes down, but we need to do our part to get there, right? And I think Chris and I are in agreement. He didn't like give the promised land to the people. They had to go fight to take it, right? And that's how we need to look at it, is we need to do our part towards that kingdom.
Yes, definitely.
Right.
It is interesting. I'm sure it's otherwhere, but I know Israel is really pioneering desalination, and it's like they've got like 6 plants up and running, and so their water needs are still there, but they're diminishing because of the technology. And it's almost that's part of taking dominion, right? It's
Yeah, I know. I'm on well water now, and the water just tastes so good.
Oh yeah.
Right. So, where are we at? Okay, 20 and 21.
And of Gad he said, "Blessed is he who enlarges Gad, who dwells as a lion and tears the arm and the crown of his head. He provided the first part for himself because a lawgiver's portion was reserved there. He came with the heads of the people. He administered the justice of the Lord and his judgments with Israel."
So, Gad obviously made the choice to settle on the wrong side of the Jordan, right? So, and what I like about this is notice that Moses can speak blessings even on them through their poor decisions, right? And God's that way, right? Like he's not going to rescue you from the consequences of those poor decisions, but he'll be able to bless you still, in spite of your poor decisions. So I look back on my life and how many times I settled and didn't do the right thing, didn't fight for the high ground, and chose to be the bottom dweller instead of the high ground, or chose not to cross the Jordan because it was scary and deep, and that's like them.
Yeah, I read 21. Then he, in my version, he selected the choicest part for himself, and that just, I don't think Moses ever got over the diss of, hey, we're going to take this land. So, and Moses, if you know the story, Moses was not happy with them for, for wanting the good land on the other side of the river, and makes them, kind of loses it, and then makes them swear that they're going to go in and fight with everyone else. So, yeah.
Yeah, but in the end, it ended up not being a blessing
Right,
because they had
off.
no protection, right?
Right.
And then they were on the wrong side of the river, so they got conquered, often, right? Because it had no natural defenses. So it kind of reminds me of name escapes me. Went with Abraham.
What?
Settled in the tents.
Lot.
Lot.
Yeah.
Right. He saw Sodom and Gomorrah and pitched his tent towards it.
Because it was fertile.
Yeah, because it was a fertile land. It's the same type of thing, right? Here he was looking with his eyes instead of God's eyes, right?
But at the same time, God told Abraham to separate from Lot. Here's the opportunity. Here's an opportunity to separate, but give him the choice first.
Yeah. He just got drawn with that, the glitz and glamour of the city lights. Okay, 22. Dan.
And of Dan he said, Dan is a lion's whelp, he shall leap from Bashan.
Okay, well.
I can imagine like the tribe of Dan gathering around. Please say something nice. Please say something nice, because they get the short end, well deserved. But in 49, it was basically a finger wagging. How you'll be a serpent in the way, a viper in the path that bites the horse's heel so that its rider falls backwards. So yeah, that was Jacob's blessing to Dan. So come on, Moses, and then all I get is this. I kind of think, oh.
Well,
and it's all the way through, right? Even Revelation, they're not even listed. They're so, yeah.
Well, it was a positive compared to what Jacob had.
Yes,
but
right.
It was still couched in irony.
Yeah, they kind of the commentary, kind of said that. Kind of the impetuous nature, they kind of leap like a lion before they look,
Right. And they weren't supposed to be in Bashan. They were supposed to be on the coast. Bashan is in the north. That green segment that's off to the right, upper right, above the lake, that's Bashan. And so they're not supposed to be there. That was supposed to be, that's where the giants were.
Okay, 23.
And of Naphtali, he said, O Naphtali, satisfied with favor and full of blessing of the Lord, possess the west and the south.
So they just had the fertile area near the Sea of Galilee is what I've gotten here in my commentary. 24 and 25.
And of Asher he said, Asher is most blessed of sons. Let him be favored by his brothers, and let him dip his foot in oil. Your sandals shall be iron and bronze. As your days, so shall your strength be.
Oh, back to Naphtali. I said it on the video, but for those that didn't watch it. The full blessing of the Lord, Naphtali is where Jesus did most of his miracles. So they definitely saw the full blessing.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
Capernaum and all those towns.
Yeah. So you're missed in the men's group. They missed out on that whole nugget. 24 and 25. Asher, of course, means happy and blessed. So you know, obviously, and then like you'd said in your video, the oil I thought was a cool thing. So, you know, Jesus washed the disciples' feet with water, right? But if you were really opulently wealthy, you could wash your feet with oil, right? And that's what he's saying is that extravagant kind of blessing. And 26 and 27.
There's no one like God, the God of Jerusalem, who rides the heavens to help you, and in his excellency on the clouds. The eternal God is your refuge, and underneath are the everlasting arms. He will thrust out the enemy before you, and will say, destroy.
Okay, now typically in Old Testament language here, when you see on the clouds, that speaks of judgment, right? So in this case, he's saying that he's going to ride on the clouds when you go to fight, and he's going to pronounce judgment on your enemies, right? But on the clouds, you see that in Matthew 24, right? I'll be coming on the clouds. You know, you see a lot of that. So that's what that says. And then you'll see again the heavens, right? So once again, his dwelling place is the heavens, his sheltering, his everlasting arms. It just kind of reminds you of some of the Psalms here, at least is what I got out of that. Anything else, Chris?
There's a scene, I didn't look it up, but I think it's Elisha, and he's got this aide who's like worried about this battle coming up, and you know, Elisha reveals to him the heavenly realm, and all around them are, you know, the angels of the Lord and the armies of the Lord.
Yeah. Some of the accounts of 70 AD in Josephus' work talked about that, so that they could literally see some what they thought was angels in the sky and chariots in the sky when 70 AD was happening. So 28 and 29.
The eternal God is a hiding place, and underneath are the everlasting arms. He drove out the enemy from you and said, destroy. So Israel lives in security, the fountain of Jacob secluded. In a land of grain and new wine, his heavens also drip down dew. Blessed are you, Israel, who is like you, a people saved by the Lord, the shield of your help, and he who is the sword of your majesty. So your enemies will cringe before you, and you will trample on their high places.
You see the grain and the new wine, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of a communion kind of reference there, bread and wine. And then just, I think we've mentioned it before, you know, a lot of this won't be fulfilled until Israel finally accepts the Messiah. And I think that's it. We got a few minutes, but I would rather not go through 34 since we've already, I'll stop there, it'll get us.
And last time you was talking about, when you talked about 70 AD, destruction of the temple and all that, and how that, you know, couldn't have happened if God's presence was there. In other words, in a sense, how God kind of sanctioned or allowed that to happen, like that speaks to the fact of God bringing an end to a specific place where he is, right? Pointing towards the fact that God is not here in this place, it's everywhere. It's, you know, pointing to this well, you don't have to come here to be with God because God is with you wherever you are now.
Yeah.
And I really thought that was interesting. I never thought about it like that till you said that.
Yeah, there's different takes on that, but a lot of what I've studied has this interim period, right? So like Jesus died on the cross and he judged, got the keys to Hades, all that, took authority. He is the king, he's in charge. The thief was eating in paradise, likely with Moses, and the fulfillment of the whole kingdom age for all those that were sleeping in Abraham's bosom. And then you have this interim period, that 40 years, that generation. And it's like God was giving them time. He's like, okay, I've told you, you got 40 years, accept me as Messiah, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he couldn't have the temple here and the temple there.
Mm-hmm.
So he wiped out the temple there, and to fulfill everything he said in that generation.
Yeah.
You know,
It's like
And also the priests were just totally corrupt, and
They
that,
were.
that was from before Jesus too. They were bought and sold, and it was a political office, and
yeah.
they weren't. Yeah, it wouldn't appear that they were repentant believers.
No.
Seeking the
They had
Lord.
to hold
And
on-
this
trying
isn't
to hold
a-
on to that
yeah,
power
exactly.
they had.
and this isn't an anti-Semitic thing, because the entire church was Jewish at that time.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people tend to see that as anti-Semitic when you start talking about an alternative view, but it isn't, because
It just speaks to what power and prestige can do to people.
Mhm.
That's what that was. That's
Yeah.
what that was about. They had power and prestige and control over people, and
They liked it.
it's hard. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
hard to let that.
All you
hard
have
to
to
let
do
that
is-
go.
I mean, we read Acts. You kind of see who the nemesis is to Paul in the early church, and the nemesis was the established church. I mean, Rome was actually restraining the evil
Right.
of the church
Mhm.
in that day.
Mhm.
So, Rome takes and I'm not giving an excuse, they were very evil, but they weren't initially. For the birth of the church, the Romans were much about peace. They
Pay your
wanted,
taxes and
Don't revolt.
yeah, don't
Right.
revolt, pay your taxes and don't revolt. And they protected, for a big part of it, were the restrainer, right? But God can use all things, right? So the persecution that Jerusalem did was for the spreading of the gospel, because that persecution,
Made them
think
scatter.
about it made them scatter, because they had that Acts 2 moment, where the Holy Spirit came, and then the church is growing, and they're all comfortable, they're all sharing things, everything is kumbaya and perfect. And then Stephen gets killed, and the persecution happens, and then that spreads them out.
Yeah.
And then it says that the gospel had been carried to the whole world,
Yes.
and the world there is the known
Roman Empire.
world.
No more within.
It's oikomene is the Greek term, but
through the construct of how the people were living at.
right, and it's the same word that's used in Luke 2 of the birth narrative when it says that Caesar Augustus sent out a census to the world. Oikomene, it means the Roman world,
Yeah.
right? In the context, it means that known world, right?
Mhm.
So, and I think, just opening your eyes, people have different views of Matthew 24, but Matthew 24 clearly says for them to head to the hills. So for them to head to the hills when they see Jerusalem surrounded, that means that the judgment was a local judgment. It wasn't a worldwide judgment.
Mhm.
So it's just important to look at the words and study them and then make your determination.
Chris, your verse in John is chapter 13, verse 23.
Where he's reclining.
Yes.
Yeah. Beautiful verse.
Okay.
Thank you for teaching.